Hey guys, welcome back. This is our third video in our Christian identity series. If you haven't gone back and watched the other two, I encourage you to do that. We went over things like heritage, mission, God's strategy, things that we don't usually talk about when we talk about our Christian identity, but that I think are vital if we want to make them accessible and tangible. And today, we're going to go over some examples on how this all plays out in practice. We're going to look at some of the more esoteric parts of the Old Testament law, things in the back of the closet where we're skipping over them when we're doing our Read the Bible in the Year plan, because I think there are some gems to where if we look hard enough with the right heart, God can give us revelation. But in order to do that right, we're going to need to set the stage with some Israelite history, really to make the difficult parts of Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers come alive. And I must say, I benefited greatly from the research of Ezekiel Kaufman, Jacob Milgram, Milford Lambert. Shout out to you guys and your families. Thanks for all the work that you've done. The nation of Israel didn't start out as a nation. They were just a loose tribes of families stuck in Egypt in slavery. They didn't have their own ways of life, their own tradition, their own culture, even their own religion. It was all imposed on them by the cultural and military superpowers of their day. That would be Egypt, Babylon, and Assyria. Think of the LA, New York, San Francisco, whenever you see those names in the Bible, because that's what they represent. And all of those cultures were dominated by pagan religious practices. Now, what's important about that? Well, there are three key areas of pagan religion that we need to understand for our purposes. And that's number one, there are good gods and there are bad gods. Number two, that all the gods, even still, are subject to this magical meta-divine realm. And number three, humans need to learn how to interact with this meta-magic divine realm in order to coerce the gods to do their will. So when God brought the Israelites out of slavery and out of Egypt, he had to do a little bit of rehab. He had to show them and teach them that he didn't have a rival and he didn't contend with any magical evil realm. And if there were ever hardships that faced the Israelite people, it wasn't because of an evil God or it wasn't because of black magic. It was because of their own poor human choices, because of their own bad actions that would drive God away and lead to their isolation and destruction. And to that end, he gave them 613 rules and regulations known as the law, known as the Torah, that seem esoteric and sort of arbitrary to us moderns, but they really met the Israelite people. Those laws met the people in their own lifestyle, in their own time, and were designed to help them overcome. We're going to go over a few of these today. But my goal is not to cover everything. My goal is to sort of kickstart an inspiration to where when you see these parts in your own study, you know how to look at them and you want more and you begin to get a lot out of them. But it's got to be careful though, because it's easy not to humanize these people because they're thousands of years old, and a lot of these pagan practices seem a bit silly to us, and so it seems like a fantasy or some type of non-realistic movie. But if we approach it with some empathy and we allow the Holy Spirit to take us back into their mindsets, that's when we can get a lot of help. Example 1 is going to be Leviticus 13, 14, and 15. These are the passages of the law that deal with skin disease, uncommon discharges, and menstruation. Now, we're not going to read them because they're quite graphic and they're extensive and they're hard to follow for our purposes. But the key thing we want to understand is even things as common as menstruation, where half the population would have had it, these things were considered evil and demonic. People were terrified of it. Whole little garrisons and barricades were set up that would ostracize and put these people away, because there's poems that you can look up and that we've uncovered in our geological searches that say if you even catch the gaze of someone with one of these conditions, it could lead to a loss of life or your crops going bad or losing in battle. And the pagan solutions for these problems, if you will, that were passed down to the Israelites were you need to have all kinds of rituals and seances and magic tricks and interactions with the priest to try to do your best to get the evil demons to go away, to get these conditions to heal and to prevent any risk to the overall community. This was really bad stuff. So God had to implement rules in a way that would incur change from the inside so that they could fill their life with processes and things to replace their unhealthy relationships with these other systems. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of an ancient Israelite who contracted one of these conditions. Let's say skin disease. So immediately you look down and you see, oh, I've got a skin rash. I've got something wrong with me. And the reproach and the fear and the terror that would come from that, from not only you, but those around you. And, no doubt you'd want to run to one of these old vices, to something that made you feel better and that you were comfortable with and made everyone else feel better too. But what does God do? What do the rules say here in Leviticus 13, 14, 15, if you will, on these conditions? God says, stop. Don't do any of that. Just go home and quarantine yourself. Practice good hygiene, but that's it. You're not going to do any seances. You're not going to do any magic tricks. There's going to be no interactions with the priest. You're going to sit there alone and realize, in spite of all your withdrawals, in spite of the fact that you probably want to crawl out of your skin, you're going to see that none of these things heal you. And then you're going to start praying. You're going to start crying out to God. And then when you actually are healed, you're going to go, the law says, and do a sacrifice at the temple, thanking God for not from healing you from one of these conditions, but healing you from one of these bad mindsets from the pagan religion. These laws aren't so weird when you look at them that way, huh? And imagine the impact that it would have in other areas of your life. Where else do you have bad habits that if you only trusted God, you could have the wool lifted over your eyes? The enlightenment would come. It'd be like a domino effect. And imagine all the other people in the community that watched this happen. They'd start to question, maybe I need to put down some of these things and pick up a faith in God. Let's look at our second example. Deuteronomy 21:10. How to deal with female captives in war. Well, again, in 2022, how do you deal with female captives in war? You don't have female captives in war, right? But again, let's put ourselves back into the mindset of these ancient readers who are coming from a totally different culture and read what God is doing for them. Remember, we're trying to create change from within. We're trying to light a fire and start something that lasts. Deuteronomy 21:10. When you go out to battle against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands and you take them away captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman and have a desire for her and would take her as a wife for yourself, then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall also remove her clothes of her captivity and shall remain in your house and mourn her father and mother a full month. And after that, you may go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. It shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go wherever she wishes. But you shall not sell her for money, and you shall not mistreat her because you have humbled her. So what we see here is we have a warrior. We have a man who's just finished a battle and he's survived. And he's probably scared. He probably feels guilty. His hormones are raging, and he sees a woman that he desires. And he would normally take that woman as his concubine and rape her, and all kinds of horrible things would result from that. Now, what does God say he should do in that situation now? He said, look, if you desire this woman, I'm not going to tell you to wholesale stop, but take her home first and wait 30 days. Allow her to mourn her family, mourn her countrymen with whatever rituals and with whatever ways that she does that in her culture. Have her be with your family during that time, and don't act on any of your impulses. Then after 30 days, if you still want her, then you need to take her as your wife. You need to give her all the rights and privileges that come with that. And if you don't want her, then you're not gonna harm her, you're not gonna sell her into slavery, you're gonna let her go, you're gonna let her do as she pleases. Now, that's beautiful to me, because think about the impact that would have on not only the young woman, but also the warrior in his family. The warrior, no doubt, would have so much gratitude towards the Lord because he knows crisis averted. That would have destroyed his family. That would have destroyed him from the inside out, from acting on that impulse that was coming after war. Imagine the impact it would have on his wife and children, who no doubt know, when dad comes home from war, you can't talk to him, don't ask him about anything that happened, just try to get through it. Imagine the impact that would have on the surrounding nations, because they know this is how the Israelites treat our women, our children, in the event that we unfortunately lose. Imagine the reciprocity that could come to Israel based on that, and the glory that would bring the Almighty God. These laws, when followed, take an action in a circumstance that normally destroys people, and instead gives so many a taste of God's goodness, a taste of God's humanizing love. And that warrior and his family and that young woman, who knows what they do with that taste and where else they're inspired to go out and try to practice God's ways with other people that are oppressed or other areas of their life. The more you study these laws in their historical context, the more you're just impacted by their brilliance, because God is not requiring wholesale change that as we humans know is unrealistic. He's meeting people where they're at, and he's just trying to light a spark so the rest of it becomes their own initiative and their own idea, and that's the kind of change that lasts. That's the kind of change that gets passed down to future generations. But what was the result of all of these laws? It's a common perspective that the ancient nation of Israel, it was a dumpster fire and that it was a disaster with what God was trying to do. But I don't think that's fair. If we look at who the Israelites were when Jesus came and who he interacted with his ministry, they were a lot different than the people that came originally out of Egypt. And look, we still haven't achieved the romanticized ideal utopia that we see in the promises and the prophecies that, the Hebrews author spoke about and that we discussed in our last two videos. But if we look at what Jesus Christ accomplished, what did he do? He used the Holy Spirit, it says, to write on our hearts the infinite ways of God and how to deal with any situation, not just 613. And now we are equipped to pick up that torch and take that progression further. Looking at how God dealt with his people is likely to be the same in our lives, but we have a greater power to move forward with it. This is how we reach our perfection and how the church ultimately reaches its maturity. All this is illustrated quite well in the last passage we're going to discuss today, one of Jesus' lesser known parables, Matthew chapter 13, the parable of the weeds and the wheat. Let's look at it. Matthew 13:24. Jesus presented another parable to them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. The slaves of the landowner came and said to him, 'Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares?' And he said to them, 'An enemy has done this.' The slaves said to him, 'Do you want us to then go and gather them up?' But he said, 'No, for while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather up the tares and bind them into bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn.'" We are the wheat and the ways of the world are the weeds. And just like in the parable, I think we can all relate that in the beginning, it often seems like the wheat and the weeds are difficult to tell apart, but God says, give it time. I know we're all looking around and seeing a dark, dark world, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better. But what does God say? He says his wheat, his people are gonna mature. And then in verse 43, it says, the righteous will win out and end up shining bright like the sun in his Father's kingdom. So what do we do with all this? These are great stories. They're inspirational, but I think we have to look around and notice that we've got so much technology. We have the experience of generations in our pocket. We have a whole library of human history in our computers. We can know anything in an instant. We can be anywhere. We can travel. We can communicate instantly. Let's approach our life understanding the responsibility and the privilege that comes with all that. The whole world is hungering and thirsting and begging for righteousness, even if we can't all agree on what that is yet. This all sounds like a perfect convergence of events for God to do a powerful move. but that has to be our expectation, and that has to be reflected in our actions and our effort. I'd like you to go away today and examine your life and try to see, are there any areas in my life, like the ancient Israelites, that I've allowed culture to normalize and that are keeping me from getting to God's best and forcing me to settle? And then, is there anything that God can reveal to you, little frameworks, little baby steps you can take to try to open your eyes and begin accessing true life? God will meet you like he met them, and there's going to be supernatural results if you just give it a shot. So, as our series on Christian identity comes to a close, I hope going through where you come from, what your mission is, what's God's strategy with us and how he works with us to accomplish that, what unique role and power we have in this age, gives you more endurance, it gives you more energy, and maybe even most importantly, more creativity in how you walk out your Christian faith, and that a lot of the confusion has been taken away. As always, I'm praying for you. Let me know how it goes, and I'll see you guys next time.